Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And with our powers combined, we are almost 2/3 of Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Eagle-eyed listeners might have heard me slow rolling that intro ever so slightly.
What are you doing? George, what are you doing? I made it back perfectly. Yes, I went to shut the door. Because I realized the door was open. I was like, oh, wait, I better shut that. But I didn't want to throw you off. So I was perfectly back in time to say, and my name is Tom, without missing a beat. And now you've called attention to it.
You did good, but it did give me a moment's pause when I thought maybe I'm just going to be just soloing this, just raw dogging it, doing it all by myself.
Can you imagine that? Oh, that'd be such a. maybe I'll talk to Adam. We'll coordinate that one day. We'll just be here. We'll do our preamble. We'll talk about what articles do we want to bring up. Get the running order done, and you start bringing in the show, and then he and I just get up and leave.
Just physically leave. Don't close the chat, but physically leave the room.
Yep, just leave. Turn off the mics.
Yeah. Well, you love talking so much, do you, buddy? Well, see how you like doing a whole show by yourself. No, I'm glad you're here. Thank you. Please don't go. So we're a news and politics type podcast where we sit around and use our febrile. We
trying to mix nubile
I think I started going with febrile, but that's not
febrile?
What feeble. Well, febrile is like a fever, which is the wrong term. Feeble minded. Yeah. Well, we use our tiny feeble brains to tell you the news of the week and grind it up into a small, hour-long audio slurry and then feed it to you like a mama bird. So
that is an image.
Boy, is it. So top story this week was the Pager story. So this is essentially it's kind of like a spy. When I saw the story breaking, I was literally thinking of Argo or one of those type movies where it's like some kind of Israeli spy type endeavor thing going on. Now, Israel has not claimed responsibility for the attack, but
everyone's saying it was them. So they clearly without any fail, everyone's been no one knows who did this. But when they describe sort of what went down, they're so this could only be done by this could be done by doing this, something that Israel's Mossad or whoever did this would carry out. This is totally their MO. So they're saying it without impunity. Yeah. So I think somebody knows.
Yeah.
But they just can't they're 99% sure.
Yeah. So definitely who else would be interested or have the means or motivation to do something like this? But so the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, the militant group in Lebanon, has been escalating over recent weeks. Mainly because
Israel keeps bombing.
Israel keeps doing a lot of say it to my face, bro. Arc up. And Lebanon is more than, happy to arc up in this instance. And so they've been trading fire and missiles and attacks. But that all precedes this attack, which, as we say, seems to have been perpetrated by Israel, which is must have been months in the making. So for those who don't know, Hezbollah, compared to Hamas, in Gaza is a much more developed military operation and much more sophisticated OPSEC, right? Operational security in terms of how they manage their communications, to the extent to which they have, as a organization, avoided using mobile phones for the specific reason that they believe that Israel has the means and methods to hack those phones and monitor those communication networks.
Sabotage them.
So what they've done for some time, from what I understand, is they've been relying on this network of pages. And Israel, knowing that, seems to have said, what if we put a bunch of explosives in those pages and then detonate them all at the same time?
Yeah.
And see what happens.
what makes this seem like, oh my God, this, like, actually, no, going further back, as you say, like, this seems like a movie, or like, I know with Adam, we were talking about this off air. I was like, yeah, that this seems like some kind of political action thriller kind of thing that would happen. But in the political action thriller, it'd be more like the guys sabotaged the pager of the general. And
of a guy.
What a covert operation. We got bin Laden by whatever. Like, it'd be that kind of thing. This was like thousands.
Yeah.
I thought. Like, this is where, like, every pager that these people had, not every, I'm generalizing there, but like thousands of them had bombs in them.
Around 3,000 is the estimate. So they know that. So making the deadly booby trap pages is only half the story. However, whoever did so had a good intelligence picture inside Hezbollah, and understanding that the Mossad and Israel's other security agencies did not have of Hamas prior to October 7th. They knew that Hezbollah had placed an order for about 5,000 pages after the group's leader Sayed Hassan Nasrallah had warned in February against using mobile phones. Quote, "Your phone is their agent," he warned at the time. So this is like a long-running operation. Yeah. Clearly, they've gone, okay, we can see that we know that they've placed an order for about 5,000 pages after this warning that they've made publicly. So presumably Israel has either interdicted that supply of pages and placed explosives in them, or like made them themselves, or there's like a whole bunch of shadiness as to like the manufacturer was like basically like a shell company, and the person like reached for comment, like didn't want to say anything about it. It was like a whole kind of like weird other layer to this story as to like how did Mossad get the explosive in these pages between when they were manufactured and when they arrived in Lebanon. Like, clearly it's like a multifaceted process.
Scale.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to like somehow get the right pager to the right person, but thousands. And it's all like really terrifying. Sort of I know we've talked about like Russian poisonings and things before, but this was like that the pages, like, like it wasn't just, oh, they've all got bombs in them and they'll explode and hopefully kill the person who's holding it. But they all detonated at the same time. So it was coordinated to hit them all at once. And it didn't just get a signal and go bang. It got a signal, waited for a minute, presumably so the person would pull it out and look at it, and then it would go off in their face.
Yeah.
And it's morbid that there's footage of this sort of stuff out and around, but I know the Guardian had some that we're referring to here, had some footage of just where like one was on a table and off it went, or one was in a guy's bag and off it goes in the middle of like a market.
Which is not and we're not like, obviously Hezbollah, bad guys, not good guys.
I'm not fully up on the details and the history and all that sort of stuff there, but from what I understand, not great. Not
good guys. So we're not saying, that it's a bad thing necessarily. But you have to admit that there's a certain level of like indiscriminate fire that's happening that's
Lord knows where they could be.
Exactly. And a number, I think it was a few dozen people died, like several,
12 killed, 2,800 injured is
2,800 people injured. And some of those are going to be kids and like just
people.
Civilians and people who just happen to be the wrong place, wrong time. Someone's kid who picked up a pager when it beeped. Like, so yeah.
Or just who's next to this guy in the fruit market.
Yeah. Literally, like people bananas. Just like, it was like 3:30. I think it was like 3:30 in the afternoon. People just like buying bananas at, down at the shops, and like, some guy explodes next to you. Like, that's crazy. And I guess, they are nominally at least towards military targets. So it's like, it's a military operation, but the fact that it's so indiscriminate and so reckless with regard to other human life surrounding those people does lead me to, but like, if it was a Muslim country that did this to Israel or to a Christian or secular country, like, we have words for what setting off bombs indiscriminately in someone else's country is called. I don't think Mossad would necessarily appreciate us using those same words to describe them in this instance, but it's hard to deny the comparison.
Well, I don't know. I mean, especially if it's the special forces and all that sort of stuff. I mean, when the CIA does it, we're bringing freedom. They're just bringing freedom, George.
Yeah.
What would Mossad have to? Why would they take issue with that?
Just little explosives wrapped up in tiny little pairs of blue jeans. That's how we deliver freedom. One explosive at a time. So there was initially
it's haunting.
So it is terrifying. And the thing is, so there was one round where it was pages. There was another round where it was walkie-talkies. And so what people started doing is basically like just getting any electronic devices and just like having them destroyed, like mobile phones, laptops. They're like, well, who knows what could be next? Because it's not just the batteries have exploded that they've sent some sort of signal that can self-destruct the device.
Yeah, no.
But they've actually added like a couple of grams worth of like proper explosives into the device that have been there since manufacture that have lived.
To have updated the code somehow to know the trigger. Because it wasn't just the next time they use it, it was simultaneous.
Exactly.
They could hit all of them with the same message that is a prompt to delay the explosion that fraction of a time to do it. Like, it is for something that is it's really strange how precise
sophisticated
it was in like sophisticated, getting it across that many devices, coordinating it in sync in that way with that much forethought for it to be so indiscriminate. Like, it's like it considers everything except being precise as to who gets killed. I mean, haunting. And I think you're absolutely right. It's like, like flip the context around a little bit for other perpetrators to do this, and everyone
there'd be a different word for it.
Yeah, it'd just be wall to wall. It'd be like after 9/11.
I think in the instance of like if it was a movie and they were targeting like a particular person and it was like for
do we want to play this?
Don't play the video. We don't have to, but yeah, you can see what we're showing here is like a domestic grocery scene where like people are just literally hanging around buying fruit and explosives go off just in the middle of your regular
just
day,
out of a guy's bag, like the pager was just in his bag and bang.
Yeah, so it really drives the point home that these, it's indiscriminate.
Like even
like if they were targeting like a big boss or something, like I could like get behind it, like the like Stuxnet, where they introduced a computer virus to the nuclear facilities in Iran to try to make the centrifuges overspin and then destroy themselves, and like that's how they crippled the Iranian nuclear program. Like that would be like a cool movie worthy story. Because like, okay, it's only bad guys that are getting hurt as a result. It's not even people getting hurt. It's like the nuclear program, the illegal nuclear program getting hurt. Right. Whereas like, I feel like if they were just like a little bit more targeted with this, it could have been like, I don't know, like a really good kind of like intelligence story, but it's hard not to have that dark kind of like outline to the story of like, someone's kid got their like hand blown off as a result of this. Like,
it's like, to go with all that precision and all that sophistication just for it to be a bit of a menacing dick swing. Them like it's more a message. Look what we did. Like,
who knows?
We can get into your pages even. Like,
is it literally just like purely sort of psychological? We're doing this to like fuck with your brains as to like where we can get into, or was there some kind of like military outcome that they were trying to achieve here? Like, we're trying to sort of cripple your military kind of responsiveness, or
it achieves both, right? Like, look what we can get into, but then also like as you alluded to before, that if they're like throw out everything, Lord knows what they've gotten into, then you've crippled any means of electronic communication for them. If they're too afraid to use any kind of device like to communicate, then they can't communicate and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So
and look, I understand that these two, Israel and Lebanon are at war to a certain extent. I don't know if there's like been actually like an official war declared. I'd have to check that. But like they are nominally, they are functionally at war. And I understand, that there's a certain level of like, don't bomb us and we won't bomb you kind of thing. Like this is, the whole kind of like total war idea where everything's on the table is kind of like an accepted thing nowadays. But like, and I know we in the West like don't really have a leg to stand on. It's like, it's not like when the US like bombed Dresden, right? Like it's certainly not to that level of like, we are willing to completely wipe you off the map in order to try and advance our agenda and our point. But still, it's like, it just seems like Israel, if you want to be the good guys, like you have to stop like indiscriminately
doing bad guy shit.
Yeah, it does. Because they talk about how they're the most moral army in the world and we warn people before we bomb them and all this sort of stuff. And then you see this sort of stuff and it's just like, oh, but there's like either you just like you didn't care that it, like innocent people were just going to be hurt and potentially killed as a result of this, or you wanted it. And it's like, that's
or it was acceptable.
Yeah,
like
or it's an acceptable level of risk.
As an outcome.
Yeah, which is like neither of that is good. Neither of those things is good guy shit. You know what I mean? Like Captain America is never like, well, a couple of kids have got to get their hands blown off for us to take down Red Skull. Like this is just you gotta crack a couple of eggs to make an omelet. Like you never hear the good guys saying that sort of shit, right? So
no, and like the were this to be happening in the political action thriller that we've been referring to all the time, this is what the bad guys do in the opening 100%. Act.
Yeah.
And
this is inciting incident like that kicks off the hero's journey sort of thing. Yeah.
It also, I think, as the Guardian points out here as well, is in breach of like human rights.
I mean, sure.
They talk about don't use booby traps because booby traps can kill innocent people.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, look, if Israel were concerned about human rights, there's this is probably the 10th thing on their list that we'd probably address.
I think if Israel was concerned with human rights, the last 70 years would have looked very different.
It's extremely different, so there's that. Interesting to see how this story develops. If there's other things that are potentially, sort of caught up in this, but I'd love to see the follow the money kind of like follow up piece to this. Cause like New York Times came out with a piece pretty quickly thereafter. It's kind of like tracking down these, shell companies and all this sort of stuff trying to
too quickly.
No. Like reasonably
what
quickly.
What did they
thereafter.
know? No.
What did they know and when did they know it? But I would love to see like we've really give the story time to breathe and actually like properly run down all of these leads, because I think there's a really interesting sort of like spycraft story to tell there as well, which obviously we don't know the other side of. But it's it reminds me of like some of the shit you hear, stories about the Cold War and all that sort of stuff. All these because yes, obviously unfortunate that innocent people got hurt, but also like I do love spy stuff. Spy stories are pretty cool.
Well,
it's just a shame that innocent people had to get caught up in it. But
yes, it's usually about how like someone who was an enemy of the Russian government or something got eventually caught. And
enemy
killed.
of the state. Yes, exactly.
It's usually like an enemy, like still bad, but usually even though he escaped to London, they caught up with him or all that sort of stuff. Like what actually happened that time. Not here's how they so cleverly and sophisticatedly blew up children's hands. You're like, oh yeah, that's not good.
Not good guy shit.
I don't know. I don't think even the most hardened has a bookshelf full of military history books, spy buff can get behind that.
Can get behind maiming children? Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Speaking of maiming children, no, there's no.
What? Where are you gonna go from?
There's no transition. Next story. Kamala Harris, who we're all aware is running for president against Donald Trump, is, according to The Hill, at least nominally up against him in several key battleground states, including Pennsylvania, Michigan, and potentially Wisconsin.
By how much?
Like margin of error.
Oh, great. Is that a lot?
No, not a lot. So The poll finds Harris winning 51% of likely voters in Pennsylvania compared to 45% for Trump. Green Party candidate Jill Stein and Libertarian Party candidate Chase Oliver each earned 1% support. So presuming that the election was held tomorrow, it does seem like Trump would lose Pennsylvania. And both parties, just given
Pennsylvania is a big deal, right? If
given the way
the 2020 election,
exactly
that
right,
was one of the big battleground states.
So because it is a winner takes all state, and there's something like 19 electoral votes, and it's one of the few that's like one of the same handful of states, the same 6 states that we look at every time for the last couple of election cycles, that they need to, like, you need to win both parties for their path to victory to work. They need Pennsylvania, really. If they don't, like if Harris doesn't get Pennsylvania, she would need to pick up like Georgia, Arizona. Like she'd basically need to go with like a modified Southern strategy, which seems unlikely. So
so Pennsylvania is like the most popular girl at the dance.
Pennsylvania is absolutely the belle of the ball. And you notice this from how much money is just flowing into the state in terms of, ads and television advertising from both sides, for both candidates. So even though the race is kind of tightened up nationally, it's kind of like head to head, like 50-50, literally. Which, like, how?
and like, does it even need to be said? Like, that it's insane that's. I mean, we're just going to get bogged down in it.
I know.
That too much.
I know, but it really does seem insane to me that Trump is getting any votes. Just like the fact that it's beyond just like Barron Trump, Melania, Eric, Don Jr., Tiffany, Ivanka, like.
And like Mr. Barron, which is Trump himself.
So like aside, a friend of the show, Polyverse, is commenting, they're eating the pets, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. Like the fact that any single human being is voting for this guy just like is it strikes me and you with a fresh horror every single time that I consider it. It really is like an effervescent, like eternal present of like, how did this happen? How did we get here? But with all of that said, 50-50 race nationally, it does seem like Harris is making some headway in those battleground states, which if she wins, then it's all over. Now, in terms of like winning the electoral college, which is what counts. So I don't think there's any doubt, by the way, that Kamala Harris is going to win the popular vote. The question is like, does she win the electoral college? Does she win the presidency? That's the key. I don't really give a shit if she's like super popular, if she's not the president. That's the key thing. And yeah, it seems like even though some of her momentum is stalled, it does seem like they are making headway in those battleground states. Now, like I said, within the margin of error, margin of error for most of these polls is like 3 or 5 points. So if she's got, a few points, 51% to 45%, that's a 6-point spread. Okay. Easily could be not correct, depending on sampling bias and all sorts of things. If you want to open up the crosstabs and see exactly which demographics are swinging in what areas, like you can do that. That information is available. It will not make you feel better. It will, like I can tell you from firsthand experience, that will not alleviate your anxiety because you're mainly going to be young at Gen Z men. Is just going to make you incredibly furious at like certain cohorts of our society. It's like, I really thought like the Gen Z is going to come through for us on this, but really just Gen Z men are just, really making this very precarious for us. But, that will not alleviate your anxiety. It's really just like, as promising as this news could be, it is by no means a guarantee of like just about anything. Like it really is down to the wire on this one, which is like, again, astounding, but very much the case for whatever reason.
Just insane. I've recently listened to the 2-part episode that Dollop did on JD Vance.
Oh yeah, JD Vance sucks so much harder than anyone thought.
Fascinating, because I had never heard of him until he was he was nominated as the VP running mate and may or may not have fucked a couch. I'd never heard of the man before this. And
Jeffrey Dahmer Vance.
He's been... That's not his name.
I'm pretty sure that's it.
No, it's John Donald or something.
James Donald Vance.
James Donald. Yeah, I was gonna say it's like pretty bland.
Old James Dean Vance.
Yeah. Yeah, but just like all the pies he has his fingers in around like Silicon Valley nerd right-wing crazies.
Yeah. The kind of overlap, the Venn diagram between like people who are fans of Lord of the Rings and like white Christian nationalists, like proto-fascists. There's more overlap between those two things than you would think, as it turns out.
I kept like spit taking my coffee every time like a Lord of the Rings reference popped up as the name of the most evil company you can think of, like during that two-parter. Real good listen. I'd recommend everyone check it out.
Yeah, and his evil company was called Palantir, Mithril,
there was Palantir and working with Mithril, and then when it was just like, oh, and like blah blah blah, founded Underhill. I was and I said out loud to no one in the car, the Flame of the West. It was like,
it's the name the name of Aragorn's sword. Yeah, these guys are huge nerds. I just like, and as someone who is like has nerdy tendencies myself and like loves, like unironically loves Lord of the Rings.
I'll say it I'm a huge nerd. Like, yeah, but even like these guys make me go like, oh man, I want to take your lunch money.
This is
a dweeb.
I literally spent hours last night figuring out how to install custom drivers so I can emulate games better on my custom like gaming handheld. I am not a cool guy. Okay. I swear, the thing is, I don't even like play the games. I'm just like playing with like textures and settings.
It's
and
just
like
proof that you can do it.
I just want to be able to like solve the technical problem of being able to play this game. And then because I'm a dad and don't have that much time, I'm too tired and I have to go to bed. I don't actually play the game. But like I am not a cool guy. I am a nerd. And even these nerds make me go, oh, you fucking nerds. You fucking nerds. Stop it.
Oh.
You guys suck.
Some other one was named after whatever ring of power Gandalf has.
Yes,
like, I don't even remember the name of all them, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So for those, who don't listen to the Dollop, we'll put the link to that episode in the show notes because, it's definitely worth a listen. But, it just shows what kind of, like, fucking weirdos these guys come from. It's not just, like, like the Tim Waltz line of, oh, they're weird or whatever. But, like, these guys are, like, properly fucking, like, Knights Templar weird. You know what I mean? Like, these are extremely strange dudes with strange beliefs that are, for some reason, like, running our politics.
Well, yeah, because they have a lot of money.
Well, that's what, not for some reason. The some reason is billionaires. That's why. Citizens United is the reason.
But, dangerous nerds with a lot of money and resources.
Yeah.
Not great. So it's just insane that it's still close. But I think we just have to get over that, George. I think we just have to get over.
Oh, you mean my weekly anxiety attack is not like fruitful from like a news story commentary perspective? Me just like coming on there and like having an anxiety attack about this every week is not useful.
I think it's just that it's not gonna change.
No.
Like, it's like nothing matters anymore. Well, like nothing and everything matters because it fucking matters whether or not Trump gets reelected, right? Because like, I know 8 years ago I was sort of in the camp of like, oh fucking hell, like if he wins, that's gonna be so bad because like I think I said at the time something like it just means that like people don't care that he's a sexist piece of shit and that's disappointing, but it's not gonna destroy the world. It's just shit that the bad guys gotta win this time, and we have a lot to change as a world when we deal with like racist, sexist, insane ideologies. No, like I was wrong then. Like, yes, it could make things real bad. And in that 4 years he did. And flash forward to now, I'm like, no, it could like ruin the world if this happens. It matters. But at the same time, nothing fucking matters because it's like, it's so close. And that doesn't make any sense.
It really does.
Nothing he says matters.
Yeah.
Like it.
It is immensely frustrating that like it seems like during the debate Kamala Harris landed punch after punch on him. Like he had like a historically bad debate only outdone by the previous historically bad debate, which was so bad for the other candidate that he literally yeeted himself into space. But like, that's how bad this debate was. It was comparable to that other historically bad debate. And yet the movement in the polls is nothing. It's like, it's beyond. I think one of the commentators I listened to on Ezra Klein's podcast called it beyond polarization. It's calcification, where it's like things are so polarized that even when massive things happen, like an assassination attempt, like I think I remember reading somewhere that Ronald Reagan got like a 20-point bump after his assassination attempt. Like it swung the race basically in his favor. Trump, it was like 3 points and that was gone the next week. And like to that point, skipping ahead to this next story, Trump had a second assassination attempt this week, and it's like the fourth news story that we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even the biggest news in the world. The first one, it was like, whoa, that's crazy. Assassination attempt on like a presidential candidate, former president. That's nuts. This time around, it's like, yeah, another one of these again. Like, that's bad. Political violence is bad. Obviously, we're not saying it's good. It's obviously bad. But like, kind of like it's not going to swing the race one way or the other. People are going to look at it. It's going to be out of the news within a week. Like,
we'll probably have another one before the election even happens.
Yeah,
like,
comes in threes. It's like the thing that's notable about this story, the assassination story, is how the media and everyone responded afterwards. I think Elon Musk tweeted something to the effect of like, oh, have you seen that no one's trying to assassinate Kamala Harris, lol. And everyone was like, that's not a funny joke. It seems like you're calling for political violence. And he's like, oh, like it said something like, oh, it worked in the room sort of thing. I was like, no. You just have a bunch of yes men that you pay that laugh at your jokes. And you decided to tweet that and you think you're funny, but you're actually just deeply unfunny. Like, I think that's the entire dynamic of what's happening here. And that is the news story, not that the president, the former president was nearly assassinated again.
Because I think like as it went down, from my understanding, like wasn't like last time where like a shot was fired and people are like, oh my God, like down to the ground, blah, blah, blah. It's like his Secret Service detail spotted a gun barrel in a bush.
Yeah. So basically
on a golf course near where Trump was playing. And so they just fired at him. I'm hoping someone brought this up. They were like, I hope they knew it wasn't one of their guys, like stationed around keeping perimeter. I assume they know where they're each positioned. I hope so. Otherwise, they're just like blindly firing at each other. But okay,
you just do the thing that you do in video games, like everyone jump if you're on our team or something. It's like the guy doesn't jump and go, I think he's not on our team.
Well, dead. No, but so they fired at him and he managed to flee, and they got him like 70 Ks away trying to cross the border or something, and he had a car full of like AK-47s or something like that. And it's like, what seems to be the problem, officer? And never mind, he had a history of like mental health issues and had a trouble with, I think, a police standoff and guns like 20 years ago. So like, maybe someone who shouldn't be allowed to just have guns free for all America.
AK-47s are not allowed anyway. Like, obviously that's an illegal gun for him to have, but like, yeah, it's definitely the guns. Like guns are for sure related in this story because America...
It's definitely not the guns.
America is not the only country in the world to have mentally ill people. And yet it seems to be the only one that has multiple assassination attempts on presidential candidates in one cycle, right? So that seems to be a common factor. I just... Yeah. But yeah, back to my original point, which is that like even something that as like in previous cycles would be ground shaking, which is like a presidential assassination attempt, which for Reagan netted him, double digit, kind of increases in his polling, at least temporarily, just doesn't even move the race. We're so calcified, we're so divided in terms of, where the electorate sits, that even massive things like that, because like I have to feel like in previous eras, LBJ, JFK, these big kind of like popular leaders, FDR, I think FDR had 4 terms in the presidency. He had like 60%, like super majorities in both houses. Like you could just never see something like that happen. Like you could never see 60% of the American electorate voting for one candidate over the other. You know what I mean? Like it just does, for whatever reason, it's so polarized, so calcified that you're just never going to see that kind of swing ever again, even if the candidate is like historically terrible like Trump is. Like, even if Kamala wasn't, people go, she flip-flopped on natural gas and fracking, and it's like, I don't care. Like, she is a sane person with all of her marbles who knows how to complete full sentences, and the other person is Donald Trump. Like, it could literally be any person who has those qualifications, and it should be, to my mind, it should be completely obvious to the American public that, Kamala, generic Democrat, should beat Donald Trump. Like, Donald Trump, aside from being impeached, convicted criminal, has found liable for sexual assault, like notwithstanding all of those things, like, just go based on what he believes and what he says and the policies he would enact. It's just an all-around terrible person. And anyone with a working brain should be able to see that. And the fact that it's not like 70-30 just like continues to astound me. I know it's not never going to change. I know this is just the state of play, but like, it continues to surprise me afresh every week.
Because it's all about well, I mean, not to get too far in the weeds with it, but it's ideology rather than policy.
Yeah.
So like, the policies they announce can be bad. He can say dumb things, all that sort of stuff, but he's the face of what a whole base of people support. Whether or not he even supports it or takes actions in support of it, it's just more like well, no, I'm voting for him because I identify with this ideology. So that's why even flip-flopping on Kamala's side is like, that's not going to convince anyone to go to Trump. Just like Trump being an insane person isn't going to move any Trump supporters to Kamala. Like that, it's not going to change. So that's why it's this slim fucking margin happening in Pennsylvania that matters so much.
Yeah, just grinding it out in like half a dozen states, while meanwhile the rest of the country is just more or less decided. Yeah, it's crazy. I just don't, but I also don't see how, even if Trump is defeated in this cycle, I just don't see how that goes away. Like, even if it's JD Vance or whoever's the standard bearer next time around, it's going to be this same shit we're going to be looking at in, 2028, in 2032, in 2036. It's going to be the same. Like, you heard it here first. It's going to be the same fucking shit. We're going to be talking about fucking Pennsylvania in 12 years. Like, it's how, I just don't understand how it can be so rigid. Like, I feel like, what was it about people in the 50s and 60s where they were more movable on all this sort of stuff? Like, were their brains just like poisoned with lead? Like, what was the difference between then and now?
I mean, probably there would have been much, much more pronounced like voter suppression on not white people. So probably all the white people of the 50s were thinking along the same lines.
But voter suppression is one thing, and that definitely occurred, right? But like, but people seem changeable. Maybe, I don't know, there was less of a difference between Republicans and Democrats. They were both kind of centrist parties, and so that allowed people to be a bit more flexible to lean left or lean right. It wasn't as big of an ideological shift between the two parties, whereas now it's like, you either believe climate change is real or you don't, and you vote Republican. Like, like, it really is like, I think there's this big sort that's happening where it's like, okay, do you believe in gun safety? Do you believe in climate change? Do you believe in vaccines? It's like, well, do you believe in people's right to have an abortion? It's like, well, then you have to vote Democrat. Like, there's no other choice for you in that circumstance. And that's the two-party system, I guess, working exactly as intended. Like, and they capitalize that. They want to run on that. They know, hey, you believe in a woman's right to choose. You have to vote for us. Yep. You don't have a choice.
Vote for the sweet, disappointing center.
Yeah. So a friend of the show, Polyverse, is saying the misinfo is pretty wild now as well. That's true.
Yeah. Not even getting the internet involved in
the discussion. And we haven't even hit the proper like first AI cycle, right? Where there's a bunch of, I think the next cycle is going to be rife with AI disinformation, which I think we're too early in the technology for it to really properly hit this time around. But yeah, the amount of dog shit AI slop that's going to be available in 4 years is going to be exponentially higher than it is now. So that's definitely part of it. But like, there was disinformation in the 50s and 60s. It just traveled slower. Like, they still had conspiracy theories. They still had, it wasn't, I just wonder, because it's us. What is it about our brains today that's so different from the brains of 50 years ago?
Well, yeah, I guess just the decades long of pushing the ideology. It's been the long game.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So Trump nearly got assassinated. And that's the Secret Service put it down to them being sort of overstretched to a certain degree. I mean, trying to protect someone in wide open spaces on a golf course that Trump likes to frequent, obviously that's much harder to do than small enclosed spaces. Yeah, I mean, as to how much you can really do about that as the Secret Service, I don't know. But
well, it's all bleak and terrible. I don't know whether or not
there is one bright spot, which is the Federal Reserve has decided to cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years. Now, whilst you think most people would be happy about that, the far right is obviously very upset about this because they're suggesting that there's some kind of conspiracy theory between the government and the Federal Reserve and the government to try and like juice Kamala Harris, like by cutting interest rates and kind of improving the economic situation, how people feel about the economy, that's somehow like trying to swing the race for Kamala Harris, which seems like a long shot to me because especially given that we know that there's long and variable lags between when interest rates are cut and how long it takes to flow through to the economy being like, you know, in the order of 12 to 18 months. It seems unlikely that they, know, and like they have no reason to juice it for one side or the other. It's just like inflation has been sort of below 2.5% for a while now in America. And it's like, okay, the joblessness numbers are starting to rise. Consumer spending is weak. Like it's time to start cutting. The fact that they did a 0.5% cut was probably bigger than what a lot of people were expecting. They were thinking maybe 0.25% and then ended up cutting 0.5%, which is a lot. And it leads me to believe that they think, you know, shit's going to start going sideways really soon unless they start loosening things up. So I'm inclined to believe that our Federal Reserve here in Australia is probably not going to cut at the next meeting in September, but we'll probably start cutting rates in November of this year, which is when they're next due to meet. So, which as someone who holds a mortgage, very much welcomed. Would love a little bit of breathing space, please, and thank you. So for the first time in 4 years, they've cut, and it's a pretty aggressive cut. So we can expect another. I think over the markets are forecasting another 1%. Another 50? Sorry, policymakers at the Fed also expect to cut rates by an additional 50 basis points this year. So within the next 3 or 4 months, they're going to cut it. They reckon they're going to cut it again by 0.5%. So dropping a full percentage point in the space of like 4 or 5 months, which is a lot.
How often do you think people who like, at the Federal Reserve or, the Reserve Bank here in Australia and all that, they see all that where they're like being reported, like forecasting that we're going to drop it another 50 points before the end of the year. And you just think, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
It's the Rage Against the Machine response of fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
It's just the thing of like, these people have made, they've studied.
Yeah, I think you're pretty clever, don't you?
Done whole degrees and study and made careers out of guessing what I'm going to do. And I can just read it. I can read what they think I'm going to do, which means I could just not do it out of spite. Like how often, I don't know. How petty are they? Are there any petty bitches at the Reserve Banks?
I don't think they're petty, but I certainly think they're overcompensating. Like the first time round, they didn't raise rates quick enough initially. You know, they said they were going to have low rates well into 2024. You know, then so they gave that forward guidance. They said rates were going to stay low. Then they raised them, really hard all at once. Then they've kept them high for quite a while, and so now I think they're just kind of like, we don't want to promise anything, and we just want to make sure that things are like blindingly obvious as to where they're headed before we start making any decisions. They're like overcompensating now, I think.
Yeah.
They just keep bullwhipping. And I understand that the unemployment rate is still 4.2% here. It's not like overly high, but also like unemployment can escalate really quickly. Like if you get rounds of layoffs, that affects the rest of the economy, and then you might get layoffs in other areas of the economy the economy as a result. So it's like, 4.2 could turn into 5% pretty quick if a bunch of companies start firing people left and right. So,
and there's also, that skewed metric of unemployment being like, you're considered employed even if you only get like 1 4-hour shift a week in your desperate industry.
So and those are all different factors that go into it. So it's not just employment. It's also talking about underemployment. You're also talking about, the amount of wages that people are getting paid for that employment. It's like, well, you might have had a job earning $100,000 a year, but you got shit canned. And now you take the only job that you can get and you're earning $50,000 a year. It's like, well, you're still employed, but your material circumstances have changed pretty drastically. Substantially. And your purchasing power in the economy is also nowhere near what it used to be. So the amount of, inflation that you could feasibly generate per person is now significantly diminished. And if that happens in a bunch of different areas all over the economy, it's like you might be still looking at the exact same rate of employment being 4.2%, but people having a lot less money in their pocket to spend. And so that's not going to contribute as much to inflation. It's a very, what I've learned over this last year at great expense is that inflation is an extremely complicated, equation. And anyone who tells you they know exactly how it works is oversimplifying or lying. It is complicated. It involves a lot of different factors, a lot of things which are hard to measure, hard to look at, hard to understand, and it really just seems like it is kind of people's best guess. They're looking at a bunch of graphs, and they kind of think, yeah, I think I know what's going on here. I think I can tell a story based on economic theory about what I understand. But for every economist that says, yes, that's absolutely correct, you can find another one that says, actually, I've got a different story that explains that as well. So I was listening to a podcast called Search Engine this week where they talked about inflation, where he had this economist on to basically give a kind of alternate explanation of the big the big story that everyone tells with regard to inflation is the story of the 1970s, right? Where essentially, there was this wage price spiral where prices kept going up and wages kept going up, and Paul Volcker, the brave neoliberal hero, had to raise rates to extraordinary heights and keep him there for way longer than anyone was hoping for in order to beat the economy into submission. And eventually he did. That's the common understanding of that crisis. And I think that's what every Reserve Bank governor or Fed chair looks at when making all of these decisions, is like, you don't want to let it get out of control like the early years of the 70s. You want to be Paul Volcker. You want to come, rule with an iron fist and smash that inflation down early and hard. And basically what this economist was saying is like, actually, I don't think that's a good explanation for what happened. What happened in the 70s was a series of supply shocks that sorted themselves out. And, you had OPEC, really slamming the United States by reducing their oil production. And so the cost of goods and the cost of everything increased rapidly, very much like what happened with us during the pandemic. It's just like it was just hard to get goods. You had all these supply shocks, that being like petrol. Petrol is the most important one because it flows into everything else as to how things are delivered and how things are consumed. And there were things like a bunch of consumers, consumers are also producers. So like a lot of people coming into the workforce in the 70s, because of things like, the sort of the feminist movement, a lot of women coming online as workers and also consumers, created, a lot of minorities coming into the workforce as workers and consumers, meant there was all this extra demand in the system, and all these new consumers, all these people with money to spend, meant that, well, you between the petrol and all these new people coming into the workforce with money to spend, there was a lot more money sloshing around, and that caused inflation. And that's a very different story to like
what we're seeing now.
Well, I think it's actually pretty similar to what we're seeing now with the pandemic and inflation and all that sort of stuff. Is like, they say, oh, there was too much stimulus, there was too much this, there was too much that. And it's like, well, yes, maybe that was part of it, but there was also just a shitload of supply shocks, which as the pandemic is naturally resolving, you will just naturally see fewer of those as you don't get countries going into massive lockdowns anymore and stopping production. So it's like, to what extent has hiking interest rates and what has it actually done? Yeah. Is it just a case of like, this is a shock to the system, the market works out the shock and then it works it through. Has the reserve, this is the question they're asking, has the Fed, or in our case, the Reserve Bank, actually done anything to like ameliorate those circumstances? And it's unclear whether that's the case or not, because I don't think we're in a position economically where that we could get into a wage price spiral. You look at wages and they are not keeping pace with
hell no
inflation.
The old cosy lives.
You know, for most people, you know, I remember hearing a Sean, what was that comedian's name? Sean McAuliffe on his show talking about inflation. And they were saying like, you know, doing one of their skits was like, we being the Reserve Bank person was like, oh yeah, we raise rates so people have to pay more for their home loans, so they can't afford as much stuff and they'll buy less. And then Sean McAuliffe was like, but surely the increased cost of everything else would do that. And they were like, shh. But it's like, yeah, if everything costs more and you are making the same amount of money as you were yesterday, you have less money to spend. Like, doesn't that in and of itself?
Yeah, you don't need to also make housing.
Why do you also
more?
need to? Yeah, exactly. And because that has like also weird feedback loops and things like that. If you make people's loans more expensive and they're like housing investors and they rent their homes out, well, then they're just going to crank up the rent in order to be able to cover their home loan, which means, but housing is one of the main things that gets measured when measuring inflation. So if you raise interest rates and then people can't pay off their loans, so they turn around and pass those costs on to renters, and renters have to pay much higher rents, and that shows as increased inflation in the rental market. It's like, well, that's actually not ameliorating that problem. It's making it worse. And housing is like the main thing that people buy in terms of like the share of their wallet every month. So yeah, I don't know. It was just an interesting discussion as to like the linear relationship of like we turn down the money spigot and therefore there's less demand in the economy is probably like overly simplistic as an explanatory device in terms of how all of these things work. And I don't think that anyone's got a really good grasp of what makes what go what. I think we're all just fucking guessing. And some people are getting paid $900,000 a year to just fucking guess with graphs. Yeah. And I want that job. That's the key lesson is I need that job.
I mean, sure, but I don't know. I mean, much like most things economically, like it's all the stuff we just decided. Mm-hmm. Let's just not inflate stuff. $1 trillion coin. Like, I mean, the $1 trillion coin will solve all our problems. We can just decide, George. We can decide it.
Historically, I mean, price caps and rent controls and things like that don't tend to work pretty well from the evidence that I've seen. But like the argument that you're making there is kind of tongue in cheek is like a modern monetary theory argument, essentially. It's like you scale up the supply of money, scale up or down, depending on the needs of the economy at the time. And provided you do it well and smart, you can kind of just do that and things are okay. And that I'm more and more kind of like persuaded by that as time goes on. Like this like classical, you know, kind of like neoliberal view of economics, I'm finding has less and less explanatory power for what is actually happening in the world as time goes on. Maybe it's just because we've experienced a bunch of like once in a generation shocks and we've just lived in a notoriously volatile era between the global financial crisis and 9/11 and, the coronavirus and all that sort of stuff. Like maybe we've just got a unique view of like a period of unique volatility, but it really does seem like the economic models that we've got have not really correctly predicted what's been going on over the last, like one of those other things, we had a similar thing, a supply shock with petroleum and gas with the war in Russia kicking off and stuff like that as well. Like there's been a bunch of different things occurring that have affected the price of goods. And I think it's just more complicated than money machine go brr or not as to whether the price of stuff goes up in the economy. Anyway, I'm sure Adam is probably listening to this and raging at the fact that we've been talking about the economy this entire time for such an extended period of time. But that's what you get, buddy. Okay, you cancel on the show, and then George talks about inflation for 20 minutes. That's what you get. Anyway.
Well, I guess instead, do we want to talk about a Republican governor nominee and his habits on pornography websites?
I do, Tom. I put it in the rundown.
You did.
I absolutely want to talk about this. So, North Carolina has a nominee for the gubernatorial race that's coming up in November. And this is a man named Mark Robinson, very controversial, very socially conservative Republican. He's said a lot of things publicly, which, would suggest he's very anti-transgender, anti-LGBTQIA, just a classic Republican conservative shitbag. He is also, and this is only relevant because it impinges on the next part of the story, he is also an African-American man. And it has emerged recently as the result of an in-depth investigation that Mark Robinson has commented on a bunch of pornographic websites detailing sexual fantasies and political beliefs, which I would argue put him somewhat outside of the mainstream, saying things like, quote, "I'm a black Nazi," Nazi in all caps with an exclamation point. And this is in the comment section of the Nude Africa website.
Excellent.
I mean, good stuff.
There's so much going on.
There's so much.
One, the black Nazi thing is just a weird thing to say, I think, in any forum.
Just anywhere,
Yeah, just anywhere. But I don't know, just to see engaging on a pornographic website and maybe, engaging with the community surrounding it. It's nice to know he's a person.
Who comments on porn? What? There is a special place in hell for the sickos that comment on porn videos. Who are these people and why? And why do I scroll to the comments and look at their comments?
No, actually, I mean, I was going to save this a bit for later, but you say that. But no, if there's anything I've gathered over the years, they pop up occasionally either in Twitter or BuzzFeed when that was still a thing and stuff like that. And also, just the comments of the pornos themselves. But there's some really wholesome, nice stuff going on down there. People seem to be really kind of kind and honest. It's a form of social media, the comments of pornographic videos that is way less toxic than other forms of social media. Yeah, that's true. Right? Yes, there's still the weirdos who just say cooked shit, but I guess, don't want to yuck someone's yum. But
the ones that really sort of get me down in the comments is when I see a guy being like, I just can't handle this anymore, man. I can't keep doing this to myself. I just want to be loved by someone. And you're like, oh man, this is really sad.
Yeah.
This is actually quite profound and disturbing and sad that this guy's having an existential crisis at the thing I just nutted to.
Yeah, but I just found, because I knew this list existed, of just some nicely wholesome discussions happening in pornographic comment sections. One of them just saying, what episode of American Dad is playing in the background? That one sounds good. And someone said season 8, episode 5. And just
amazing.
Told them, someone else just saying I think the title of the video was Madison Ivy's car broke down and she needed help. I think we can see where it goes from there. But
and someone said she got stuck in the dryer.
But someone replied saying, oh, the part number for the Honda part is blah, blah, blah for anyone who's suffering the same issue. And really how you fix this car trouble is blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, people just, I don't know, they just seem like we're all here for some gratification.
We all know why we're all about. We all know why we're here.
There's no judgment here, it seems. And then everyone's nice to each other. It's a great microcosm of I think actually maybe what we should aspire to be.
Except for Mark Robinson, who talked about,
being a black Nazi.
Being a black Nazi and wanting to own a slave. He said,
good.
He said, I'd buy one.
Oh, great.
It talked about peeping on girls in the showers, which is something he'd done apparently as a young man. Liked watching porn featuring transsexual trans people. Yes, I wasn't going to use the slur that he used there. Quote, "That's fucking hot. It takes the man out while leaving the man in," Robinson wrote. And yeah, I'm a perv too. Yeah, it's so funny. The ones who are the Republican, you can put it down to a person. The Republican shitlords, the conservative shitbags who are always the ones having a go at people and talking about conversion therapy and talking about Jesus, and the ones who rail the hardest against this shit. It's always those ones that have got
they're the ones doing the thing.
Always the ones doing the thing, like 100% of the time.
Yeah. It's crazy. They are not beating the allegations.
Friend of the show, Polyverse, says there's an entire subreddit dedicated to showcasing the comments on porn. Well, I would like the name of that subreddit for research purposes, Polyverse. So if you could just pop that in the chat, that'd be
I too would like the name of that subreddit, but only so as I can get directions away from it.
Mm-hmm. So as I may never go there.
Need to know what link not to click.
CNN first reached out to Robinson Tuesday morning with evidence connecting him to the comments on Nude Africa. It took his campaign 2 days to respond and issue a denial. During his interview with CNN, Robinson repeatedly said that issues that faced North Carolinians were more important than what he called, quote, tabloid trash, unquote, and he steered the conversation towards attacking his opponent in the race, Democrat Josh Stein. "We are not getting out of this race. There are people who are counting on us to win this race," Robinson said. That was obviously backed up by the fact that he chose not to get out of the race at that stage because it was before the deadline for his candidacy. He's chosen to stay in the race. That deadline is now passed. So Mark Robinson is officially on the ballot in November for the governorship of North Carolina. Like, there's no backing out now. It's too late. So we'll see what happens there.
Any of this matters.
Surely the black guy who says he's pro-Nazi, a black Nazi, and also, like, surely this, you know what I mean? Surely this, there has to be some political gravity, right? As to what, you can't just say and do anything and have there be no electoral consequences ever, right? Like, surely this would have to make a difference.
Yeah. You'd fucking hope so, but I'm not going to hold out hope. If anything, people might just, for the memes, we'll just be like, oh, he seemed all right.
You know what?
He watches porn just like us.
Great guy to have a beer with, I have to say. Polyverse is writing the subreddit is called Pornhub Comments. So if you're interested in viewing that subreddit for comedic research purposes only, then feel free to do so. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and mother flipping TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow us all down to, why were you making all those faces there? What was going on?
I'm just reading more of the things that Mr. Robinson posted on that porn forum.
Did you want to share with the class, or are you just wanting to make strange faces?
They are a lot of words that I cannot say.
Okay.
So I will not.
On that note, no, I already did that. Thanks for listening. We love your faces. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Bye.